Today, we're going to take a look at the brand new Halo Infinite map, Streets. That map name goes kind of hard, not going to lie. Back in my day, the kids used to 1v1 on Guardian, but now, if you got some Halo beef, you better take it to the streets, bruh. Thanks to IGN, we've got plenty of footage to break down, from a full map walkthrough to both strongholds and oddball gameplay. Not my favorite gameplay, I'd like to add. In fact, it might be the worst gameplay I've ever seen in my life. But that's not the point. We're going to be nice today, okay? We're going to focus on the important information. Going to do my best to keep things detailed and organized today. We'll start with a general overview of the map, pointing out things like weapon, equipment spawns, and objective markers, and then we'll dive in and start talking strategy, along with jumps and slides, break down a couple plays, the works. If you want to jump around in the discussion, you can do so in the play bar, but before you do that, don't forget to join me on the way. I mean, speaking of which, we are basically at 30K subs, which is a hell of a milestone. So if you are a subscriber, thank you so much for doing so. And if you're not one and you like this stuff, then I mean, please hit the button, okay? You know, just do it, okay? Do it.
Think of some think will get to me, huh? Come on, do it. Lay it on right here. Do it. Do it.
He means subscribe to Shyway.
We're doing little voices undercover. Come on, sweetie, do it. Oh, that's a sweet little pucker.
Okay, so Streets is pretty clearly an asymmetrical map. It's very dense and busy at first glance, but it's actually very small and simple once you get the feel for it. We'll take a look at a top-down graphic in just a bit, but first, I just want to take a second to appreciate the aesthetics here. Like, this is a pretty damn good-looking map. I'm getting some pretty heavy Plaza vibes here. Plaza was one of my favorite maps in Halo 5. The gameplay on that map flowed really well, and it was an excellent playground for some of the most technical and unique jumps and movement in the game. I get the feeling that Streets is going to carry over those elements pretty nicely. Just visually speaking, I love the colors here. Like, Plaza was a very pretty map, but there was this heavy use of green throughout the environment, whereas Streets has a ton of color diversity. You've got that street on the left-hand side with the strong purple hue and the big hollow puppy sign, and then you've got that dark red from what I assume is a Chinese-style restaurant, and I like the touch with the red lanterns, and then that bright blue from the police station. There's even an arcade that's just full of color, and that Halo Infinite Arcade Edition game. For the record, it would be sick if you could interact with that and it was like a basic Metroid-style side-scroller as like an Easter egg. It's just so densely packed with color and details that make it feel like a lived-in environment while also being a carefully crafted play space. And I'm a big fan. Honestly, graphically speaking, it kind of puts some of Infinite's other maps to shame. Like, compare this map to Livefire, and Livefire kind of looks like a bland old Forge map now, not gonna lie. All right, with that out of the way, let's take a look at a top-down graphic, and pretty easy to see the asymmetrical design from this view. Now, like we saw in the walkthrough video, one team, and I know they're not actually red, but for organization's sake, we'll say red team spawns here in the subway station, whereas the blue team spawns on the opposite side in the police station right here. Now, despite the many small rooms and corridors on this map, it's actually a pretty standard 3-lane setup. We'll call this lane 1, lane 2, and lane 3. On the blue side of the map, your routes are pretty simple. You've got one main access point to each of the 3 lanes, whereas the red side has a little extra. You've got this staircase into lane 3. You've also got this sneaky corridor that splits into either lane 1 or 2. What's interesting about the map, though, is the entire thing is built on an incline. So red team spawns in the bottom of the map. The blue team spawns into high ground. So they're given an immediate positioning advantage off the rip. But once we throw the weapons and equipment into the mix, that power dynamic changes. Now, these little ammo markers, these are weapon rack locations. Now, we don't know what's confirmed for competitive just yet, but based off of what I've seen in the gameplay, let's label these. The blue team has early access to a pulse carbine right here in the police station, a BR at Stronghold A, which I assume could also double as a commando in competitive settings, and another pulse carbine in the cafe. Not entirely sure why there's 2 pulse carbines. You could argue that because this weapon excels at more of a mid-range, it could be useful to have one here to lock down both these lanes from high ground. You could also argue it's redundant. Blue side also has access to this drop wall or deployable cover in the alley here. Now, the red side has a lot more to work with. You've got this weapon rack right here that I've seen is either a mangler or plasma pistol. The one above it is a shock rifle. Then you've got the spike nades out on the stairs, and this one I've never actually seen in any of the gameplay. As far as I'm aware, nobody went back here, so it could be a commando, or better yet, make it a pulse carbine, right? Complete the pulse carbine triangle and save Cortana. Boys, we did it! Red side also has access to this thruster as well off a spawn in this driveway. Even with the mid-tier weapons in the center of the map, I'd say red has a slight timing advantage getting there. You've got this one on the vending machine that I've seen as either a shotgun or a heat wave. And then on the stairs here, I've seen as a sentinel beam. Overall, it's an interesting dynamic. Basically, we're not going to know how this will play out balance-wise till we actually play the map, but a potential pain point, I think, could be maybe this shock rifle, having access to this. That's basically a mid-tier sniper. This weapon in the right hands is very powerful. You've also got this thrust, which is clearly better than the cover. It's also worth noting that there's no grapple or repulsor on this map, which on one hand is understandable. This is a very small close quarters map, but I'd be curious to see how those items might work if they were thrown into play. And then just to round this out, you've got your high tier weapon in the center, in this case, the rockets. And then can't forget about the plasma nades over in Stronghold B. Of course, you have Strongholds A, B, and C here as well. And it's important to note that even though there is this disparity off the starting spawn, in a game type like Strongholds or Oddball, the spawn system isn't static, it's dynamic. So while players might spawn at red and blue at the start, that can flip throughout the game. You could have blue players spawning on red side, red players spawning on blue side, depending on what players think are the best areas of the map to control. Maybe the objective would be to get the best weapons and bring them over to the high ground. So we'll see. Okay, no more top down. Let's actually jump into this map. Now, my objective here is to be quick and thorough and point out basically everything that comes to mind as we sort of skip through different sections of this walkthrough. Ideally, in the end, what you'll have here is not only important info to approach this map, but really any map in Halo Infinite the moment we get our hands on the multiplayer, which, if some of the rumors I've been seeing on Twitter are true, might be a lot sooner than we think, apparently. So also a good reason to just keep this one quick. Now, the first thing I want to tackle and really just get out of the way here are curb slides. Now, if you know me well, you know I love my advanced tech. The more skill gaps in my Halo game, the more excited I get. But I don't want this discussion to just be about curb slides, so let's just do this quick. If you don't know what curb sliding is in Halo Infinite or how it works, check the description. I've got a tutorial on that, but essentially, if you perfectly time a slide off a low-height surface of about 1 to 2 feet, you can boost yourself forward. That boost can be used to speed up rotations, to make escapes, or just straight up outplay people. Now, if I was to point out every potential curb slide location on this map, we'd be here for an extra 30 minutes. So thanks to my editor lights, what you should be seeing on screen are screenshots of different sections of this map with potential curb slide spots highlighted. This, of course, isn't everything, but this is just a taste of where you might be able to apply this technique to speed up to make an outplay. And just to add to this narrative, I'll say that even with some taller objects, like for example, that vending machine with the heat wave, it might be possible to perform a curb slide off of this. If it is possible, the timing is crazy difficult. So it might never make sense to go for it, or it might just not work at all. You really got to take it on a case-by-case basis and experiment. The last thing I'll note here is that with good attention to detail, there's a variety of creative, extra ways to hit this technique. For example, at the bottom of ramps or staircases, if you cut off the side of a staircase on a diagonal, you can hit this technique and launch out sideways. Or do it the other way around. You run up the staircase a bit and then drop off, curb slide, and shoot the other way. So there's a ton of creativity, a ton of potential you can see just off of this, and it's something we'll dive into and discuss in more detail once we actually get to play the game. All right, now, even before I press play on this screen that I've been sitting with the whole video, there is a lot that comes to mind just for this section of the map, specifically starting strats. How would you split your team to take advantage of all the different weapons we just talked about? So you got the shock rifle above, there's a mangler behind his gun, there's a hallway on the right with a weapon we don't know, and a thrust down there also. So I'm thinking you'd want to send probably one guy up here, 2 guys out front maybe, and then 1 guy to the right, depending on what you want. And you want to do that quickly, right? There's 2 ramps directly in front of this player. There's one right here, a second one farther down. 2 ways to approach this could be to sprint and a well-timed slide near the top of this ramp that should jet you straight out the door, or you could sprint, jump, hold, crouch, and drop slide on the lower ramp instead for a later launch for the same type of thing. I find it interesting that there doesn't seem to be any form of shortcut way to get up to this balcony. A lot of the time in Halo, there's always a sneaky skill jump way to get up to something like this and to shave off a couple seconds. But as far as I can tell, they seem to really want to limit you to that left hallway and limit the time it takes to get to the shock rifle above. Unless, of course, there's some sort of crazy like ghost jump. We've seen ghost jumping in Infinite already. So unless you can get like a foothold in here, or I'm thinking maybe above the the doorway with the number 2 on his right. Maybe you can ghost jump here. I don't know. It doesn't look like they want you to shortcut up here. Although, let's say we add player collision to this discussion. This is a good reason to double back on this topic. If player collision was on in this situation, you could very simply jump off your teammate's head, jump up to this balcony, and save time. And on one hand, I'm thinking that's creative and kind of badass. So I like that. I want to see player collision. But at the same time, this would become the strat. This would be the meta. You would do this every time. If you're a pro team, you would send somebody up to this shock rifle because it's clearly the fastest way to get there. If that happens, would that affect balance? Would that make it so that a player gets the shock rifle so quickly and has a sight line on the other side of the map so early that he gets first shot advantage? And would that hurt balance in some way? So it's an interesting topic of discussion here where I think player collision would add to the creativity here, but also in a sense simplify this engagement. It would be very obvious to go for that every time. Speaking of this left side hallway, a couple things that come to mind. Can you stand on these machines? If you can stand on them, can you jump up here and get up here? I doubt you can. It's probably blocked, but it also makes me think if there was grapple or repulsor on this map, how much can you access up here? How much is blocked? How much is accessible? Because I think some form of accessibility up here is nice. It adds to creativity, to skill gap in some cases, but too much of it could hurt balance, could break the game. So it's an interesting, area to explore when we get to play. This glass, by the way, can be broken. An IGN player walks right through it at one point. When he picks up the shock rifle, of course, he's just kind of looking around without an objective, but it made me think about how a good player would go about familiarizing themselves with this section of the map. Because, of course, this is a very important section of the map to be able to master. This is pretty standard info in all FPS games, but good info regardless. The first thing you'd want to do in a spot like this is understand all the different sightlines and angles you can impact, and then understand how to limit those angles and isolate specific ones, and also prepare yourself for gunfights. For example, by standing here at the bottom of the stairs, he's basically cut every single angle of attack on him and isolated an angle with this stronghold A right here. So knowing that, and knowing that this is the first, potential angle, that's how you'd want to approach this. After you pick up the gun, you'd grab the gun and your reticle would be first placed here, ready to take a fight on stronghold A. And as you move forward, more angles would open up to you. And that's when you'd want to be able to very quickly and efficiently snap your reticle onto other important locations at head level, like right here, considering blue is coming from somewhere back on the right side. It'd be head level here or around here, and really just understanding in limiting in your mind the right stick movement that you would need to do to snap to each of these locations quickly and efficiently. And then once you've set that reticle and prediction, then you got to keep in mind your left stick, your strafe, which is essentially the foundation of your aim. You can use that to guide your shot and ensure you don't have to overcompensate with the right stick. And then when you do strafe, especially if you're strafing away from the angle, you need to intimately understand how that strafe will affect the follow-up last-second micro correction on your right stick to adjust and hit the shot, if that makes sense. This is a very convoluted way to explain all this, and it's something we can touch on in the future. But essentially, if you're this guy and you're on this map alone, you should kind of be taking like shadow fights, so to speak, putting your reticle in locations where you expect enemies to be and pretending you're in gunfights. You're actively engaging in fights. If you can do that as you run around on these maps, you can train yourself to be prepared when there are actual enemies to fight. The walkthrough cuts to this clip, and a couple notes on this clip in case you happen to be like an IGN journalist watching this, but the nades that he throws, right? He's throwing them too far, right? Unless he got a call out that the enemy was weak and backed off to arcade, maybe he can go for a wild nade and finish off the kill. But the issue with throwing these nades as far as he is if they do hit a target, he's not in position to impact whatever it hits right away. So it doesn't really help him, as opposed to banking a nade off the bottom of the stairs so it bounces and blows up in the door, or banking it off the wall so it blows up in a similar spot. At least that way, if it hits the guy, he's in position for you to clean up immediately, and it helps you. Speaking of not helping yourself, this man jumps from high ground, does not look both ways before crossing the street here, with rockets as well, switches them out, and then dies. So just a number of mistakes, unfortunately. But I mean, basic Halo knowledge, hold on to your high ground, especially if you have power weapons, and look before you leap. When I first saw these spike nades, I was thinking it would be sick if they were plasmas instead, right? Because the rockets on this map spawn in a super exposed location. They're basically begging to be combat evolved. If these were plasmas, that would be a sick little sandbox interaction. But thinking twice, if these were plasmas, then you would safely launch it every time as a starting strat. Like, why ever take the risk otherwise, right? So it wouldn't be fair. But I like the idea of being able to combat evolve the rockets. If you remember, the plasmas are still on this map. They spawn over in Stronghold B, which is about an equal distance from both sides, and it's farther away from the rockets, kind of far enough away that you would have to rotate with them to find a good spot to then launch the rockets later. So that could still happen. And now I'm curious on what kind of launches players could put together or strats that would involve the plasma nades. A pretty cool little interaction. I'm a big fan of this spot on the map, by the way. There's like a little window in the corner here that you can stand in. I love spots like this because it's a high ground position, so it's clearly powerful. It's got a sneaky angle onto the rockets here, but then there's this added nuance of this like ventilation here. It looks like you can stand on this, right? So you could probably precisely jump to it, take a more aggressive angle, and if you're good with your movement, you can jump back and forth and hold on to the position. You could even drop down to get rockets. You just got to be careful. If you're jumping from here up to this window, it looks like a forced clamber, right? So the timing that you go for that, you'll have to put your gun down. So there's a bit of strategy, I guess, behind that. The other side of this ledge, the ledge is curb slide height, so you can launch out of there if you need to. So all little elements of this, like, I'm just a big fan of this whole area of the map, and I can't wait to see how it's played. These tables, by the way, I imagine if you were to walk into them, they'd break into pieces like they do on Bazaar, which for this, I guess, is fine, but it just reminds me of a larger concern I have with Infinite right now, in that there is a severe lack of interactable objects on Infinite's maps. Historically, interactable objects have brought a lot of creativity and a lot of value to Halo's sandbox. I mean, think back to Halo 3, the pylons in Halo 3 and the wacky, trick jumps and shenanigans that have gone down with that over the life of the game, or even just using a box for a creative outplay. I've seen some wild stuff in Halo 5 with that. You just lose a lot of potential. You lose some of that authentic, Halo-ness, I guess, by not having this on your map. So I would put this at the top of my wish list. Bring back more barrels and boxes in Infinite's maps, please. 343. You guys know I love my slides, so I couldn't resist just pointing out that there's two pretty mean drop slides here, like this ramp here and this one here. You can either sprint, jump, land, and slide, or you can sprint up the shoulder and drop and slide down this ramp and do it on the other side as well. Just a nice, quick way to make a rotation. I guarantee that'll be used a lot. This section of the map, I think, is pretty cool as well, by the way. This appears to be a crouch jump height ledge, I think, or sprint crouch jump, maybe for a little bit more height. But once you get up here, this ledge is very vulnerable. There's no cover up here, but what I like about this spot is out of all locations on the map, I think this is the best spot to attempt the drop back clamber or reclamber, Cali clamber, whatever you want to call it, to attempt that technique, right? Either right here or on the other side of the ledge, you would drop off and reclamber. Now, this technique is harder to do in Infinite, and it's less useful, but it's only very useful in adverse high ground situations like this. So this is one spot on the map where I could imagine you'd want to go for this technique to fake out an opponent, to make a good play. I noticed there's a couple signs on these buildings. I wonder if you can grapple up there and stand on top of any of them. In Halo 5 Plaza, there was tons of signs, and just about every single one could be stood on or interacted with in some way. And in some cases, I'd say this was a great thing because it was difficult to get up there and very risky as well. You were very vulnerable, so you had to have good awareness of when to do it. Other signs, on the other hand, were kind of cheap. You could hide behind them and in tricky spots that players would never see you, and you could milk the game or kind of set up some cheesy plays. So I would like to see some level of interactivity here, and if not in competitive, at least in social. But let me know what you think. Over here in this corner with the thrust, just a couple things come to mind. Of course, if you grab this thrust, you can probably jump, thrust, clamber up here. It looks like it's about the right height, but I wonder if you can crouch jump to this pizza sign. As he walks up here, can you crouch jump to the little box on the wall right on his right-hand side? So little stuff like that. Are there ways to skip and get up to this bridge quickly is what I'm wondering. I know there is so much more I could go into with this map, but for today, I think I've said enough. I'm sure we'll revisit this map very soon. Before we go, though, I do want to throw to this funny moment with Ryan Mccaffrey. Let's just check this out.
I could see CTF being really interesting here.
Yeah, it's something that, we'll see how that plays out. It's definitely something players can put together in custom games on here. That's always a challenge with an asymmetric map.
True.
And especially one like this that's designed for that more kind of circular and flowing gameplay. Attack and defend can be a bit more of a challenge to put together on it.
Was that your really nice way of saying no, Ryan? It's not a CTF map at all. and don't.
That's my way of saying, like, you know, usually players can put together stuff in custom games that we never thought of.
It's almost as if you're the multiplayer designer and I'm just an idiot that doesn't know anything. Now, this is a really interesting space.
Ooh, that was low-key kind of savage by that 343 dev to just stop talking. Like, maybe they exchanged eye contact or something. I don't know. For the record, though, no shots to Ryan Mccaffrey. Dude's a GOAT. I've been watching him since I was a wee boy. Why does CTF not work, though, right? First off, and the biggest reason is it's not a symmetrical map. Typically, CTF is designed on symmetrical maps, so it takes the same period of time to get from one side to the other, regardless of what side you're on. If it's not a symmetrical map, then one side might be better or more efficient than the other, which completely ruins balance. You also got to think of how this map is designed. It's very close quarters with a lot of very tight corridors and easy ways to block sight lines. So what could happen is you could get around to Slays, grab a flag, and then cut the sight line so fast that no spawner could spawn up and get an angle on you in time to kill you, which kind of, you know, breaks the flow of gameplay. You'd want a bigger map with wider sight lines for CTF, typically. Although, just to add to that, I was thinking that because the map is asymmetrical, maybe there's potential for a one-flag CTF mode, like attack and defense style, where you switch sides every round, which could potentially work, but if you did that, then wherever the flag is on the map, that would be the focal point of all the action for the entire round, which is kind of stale for gameplay, right? Because you don't get to take advantage of all the unique locations around this map during the game. And that's why rotational style game modes work so well, like Oddball and like Strongholds, because you're constantly in flux, you're constantly moving, you're taking advantage of this unique kind of asymmetrical space. So that's, I guess, the reason why you don't have CTF and why you do have Strongholds and Oddball. And with that, I think we're good to wrap this video. I am tired, and that was a long video. If you stuck with me to the end, once again, thank you for doing so. I appreciate you. Hopefully, you gained some value. You learned something watching this. What do you think of the game type discussion? Do you have any ideas on game types? What do you think of the map Streets? What do you think of the stuff that I brought up or didn't bring up? Whatever, let me know in the comments below. Remember, guys, if you like this content, if you want to see more, hit sub, check out related videos. I don't know when we're going to get to play this Infinite multiplayer, if it's like November 15 or if it's December. Whenever it is, dude, I'm ready for it. I can't wait. I hope you are too. I'll see you out there on the way.